with Martin Arostegui. He's a renowned and highly experienced journalist, especially in military and intelligence matters, who has covered the key of international conflicts we are now seeing deploying in Ukraine. He has worked for Voice of America, Wall Street Journal, the Daily Telegraph, the Washington Times, CNN, Fox News, United Press International, and France 24. And he's author of the book of military about the military special operation called Twilight Warriors. And now we talk in next song. We talk with Martin. I'm a Dr. Christian Barrientos Ichaso. Thank you for subscribing and sharing everything about international law, security, anti-corruption, and business, all about the business too, and economic analysis. Thank you, Martin, for starting this podcast.
Thanks, Christian. Thanks for having me on board. Good to see you as always. Well, I think to start off, today I'm reporting from Texas, and where, of course, we've all heard of the terrible massacre of 18 school children by supposedly a lone wolf assassin, a murderer, a psychopath, an 18-year-old high school dropout who managed to get hold of an AR-15 automatic rifle plus 300 rounds of ammunition, and for his announced purpose, because he had announced it before on social media, and was under no kind of police surveillance, under no sort of no kind of surveillance at all, to go and massacre a school. All right, he said he was going to do that, and he had a previous arrest record. This guy was seriously sick, with serious criminal and psychopathic tendencies proven and announced, and he was under no kind of treatment, no kind of surveillance, no kind of observation even at all, none. So he got hold of two AR-15, he had two AR-15 automatic rifles, hundreds of rounds of ammunition, a brand new pickup truck, which he crashed into the school before going into an open door, a door which is curiously supposed to be closed but was opened just as he arrived, and went into a classroom and shot two teachers on the way to a classroom where he went in and massacred 17 school children and 2 other teachers. Okay, this was the incredible, grisly, horrible incident that happened, episode that happened in Uvalde, Texas this week, which of course is comparable to any of the Russian atrocities we've been reporting about Ukraine over the past month or so. I mean, it's incredible. You know, the incident has been covered, I think, quite extensively. But there is one thing that stands out. There's one aspect of this incident, of course, that's been used by people trying to tighten gun laws as a platform upon which to call for new gun control legislation, which is understandable. Republicans actually are joining in for more careful background checks on people to whom guns are sold. And but there's another aspect of the incident which stands out and is being very discussed down here. But that is the appalling performance by the police. You know, the town had its own police force with its own SWAT team, which did absolutely nothing during the entire siege to go in and kill or disarm the gunman. This young guy whose name I'm not going to say because I don't think it's worth giving him a name. This murderer, this monster. And they did nothing during 1 hour in which he was locked up in the classroom with 18 children. Nothing, except keep the parents away that wanted to go in and do something. The incident was finally resolved by members of the Border Patrol whose children were at the school, who found out that the children were at the school and went there and on their own initiative went into the classroom, despite being stopped by the police, despite against the advice of the police, who felt that we should wait it out. Who felt that there was no need, it was too dangerous to go into the classroom. Despite that, the members of the Border Patrol got their own weapons, went into the classroom, killed the monster, but by then it was too late, and all the children and the teacher in the school in the classroom were dead, except for a few survivors that managed to survive by pretending they were dead or hiding under the dead. Now, this just shows a complete lack of preparedness, a complete lack of a totally demoralized police force, police attitude in a very sensitive part of the United States, which is the border between Texas and Mexico. It's the reason that the Border Patrol got involved. I mean, it was close enough to a Border Patrol post, and that's why they got involved on their own initiative. I mean, they weren't called by the police, nothing. It reveals two things, Christian. First of all, I think there's an over-bureaucratization of law enforcement today. Apparently, one of the reasons given as to why the police didn't go into the classroom earlier or as soon as they could was because since the shooting had stopped, obviously he'd shot everybody, the shooting had stopped, they considered that it was then a barricade hostage situation in which they would try to negotiate the guy out, in which they would try to force him out without using force, right? They didn't even know what was going on inside the classroom. You know, it's quite amazing to me that one of the things some security state official, whose exact title and name I do not recall right now, appeared on television after the incident, saying that the security measures actually worked quite well because, well, everybody went into lockdown after the incident, and the police acted according to the prescribed or according to the procedures. You know, I frankly, this is absolutely astounding to me, and it just shows the very bureaucratic attitude there is now towards law enforcement, by which the procedures, the established procedural way of doing something becomes more important than the objective you're actually supposed to achieve through those procedures. You know, that 3 members of the Border Patrol had to come in and do something which the police could not do because they were following procedures for a hostage barricade scenario that they've practiced or they've been schooled in, is the way, I suppose, that law enforcement now functions in the United States. And this is absolutely outrageous. And I think this is what stands out of this whole incident. Law enforcement is over-bureaucratized. Police are being overtrained to adjust to procedural parameters, which may have absolutely nothing to do or may not be applicable to certain situations, very dangerous situations which a lot of human lives would be at stake. And this is happening in the most sensitive part of the United States, the border area between Texas and Mexico. This is how law enforcement is performing in the most sensitive border area that the United States has. So this really, really is very, very disturbing. And there's another factor that stands out here, which, supposedly this is being investigated by the FBI, who are looking into possible enablers for this shooter, this murderer. But it's something curious, and it's something that I find curious. This unemployed high school dropout, whose only job had been in the past year had been at some point waiting tables at Wendy's, had $5,000 or more, at least $5,000 or more, to spend on his weapons, the AR-15 rifles, as well as hundreds of rounds of 5.56 ammunition, very expensive ammunition. And how did he get a hold of that? There's no explanation for that yet. I mean, someone said, well, he saved money while waiting tables at Wendy's. Hey, listen, Christian, I think you and I are in the wrong business. I mean, if you can, if you can put away $5,000 of waiting tables at Wendy's for a few weeks, wow. I mean, I really think we've all got to go and do that, because that's, that's where the action is, quite obviously. That's amazing. Amazing. And also, he had a 70,000. He was driving a $70,000 pickup truck, brand new.
Oh my
How
God!
He got a hold? Possibly stole that, or somebody lent to him, or I don't know. But he seemed to have tremendous means for a guy who was an absolute, total marginalized societal loser. A high school dropout who'd done nothing, unemployed, and lived with his grandmother, and had done nothing over the past year except wait at tables at Wendy's for a few days. Presumably got fired because the guy is just an absolute, because, I don't think a guy like that would last in any kind of job for very long. So someone appears to have enabled this guy, okay? This is being looked into. I'm not going to draw any conclusions. I don't want to get conspiratorial about this, but this does seem to be very, very strange. And I assume that investigators, if they're looking into the background, are going to try to shed some light on this. Okay. From here, we go on to a terrorist type episode that's been uncovered, again involving the border area between America and Mexico over the past week. Apparently, ISIS has sleeper. Well, for one thing, ISIS it becomes clear through what's been uncovered, which is an ISIS-connected plot to assassinate former President George Bush in the United States, at his Texas home. It's all right. We now know it's official that ISIS has sleeper agents in the United States. Okay, ISIS in places we would not expect them to be. This particular individual, the suspect, by the name of Ahmed Shihab, was living in Columbus, Ohio. He was residing there. Okay. And they uncovered him as a result of an FBI investigation that penetrated a human trafficking organization that was going to smuggle, I think possibly they're going to smuggle the hit team into the US. A lot of them through the Mexican border, right? It appears that some of them may already be in the US. There are 2 Hezbollah suspects that are believed connected with that may have been smuggled in through this human trafficking organization that may already be in the US. And several others are either also inside or on the way. It was being financed, the operation was being financed by, while they were using ISIS and possibly members of Hezbollah. We don't know if the 2 Hezbollah members that were smuggled in by this human trafficking group, who have not been tracked, by the way. They haven't yet tracked them down, were involved in this particular operation or not. But it appears that ISIS have been commissioned to do this. It was being done through the ISIS network in the US, but commissioned by members of people that have been members of the former government of Saddam Hussein, former members of the Iraqi Ba'ath Party that had a lot of resources, a lot of money, and were based out of Qatar. Okay. So in other words, an operation in the US using ISIS and maybe Hezbollah doesn't have to be commissioned necessarily by ISIS. It doesn't have to originate with ISIS. It can actually be organizations using an ISIS networks in the US that are already quite extensive. Okay. And if a former Iraqi general in Qatar can do this, The mind boggles when you think what an ISIS organization, which is now becoming rooted in Afghanistan as a result of the Taliban's power grab, the resumption of power following the US withdrawal, where ISIS does form part of the system, and they're operating against members of the Taliban government, but not necessarily against the entire government. There are members of the Taliban government which have been associated with ISIS. So it appears that ISIS possibly is protected by a faction of the Taliban government in Afghanistan. So supposedly a hit in the United States could come out of there at any moment. Could be originate out of there, or maybe it is in the process of being organized. Because they do have a network, a highly operating network. I mean, the operation is quite elaborate. They were using encrypted communications through certain designated social media platforms to cover up the actual the origin of the messaging, so the messaging couldn't be tracked. And apparently the Ahmed Shahib had already been to Texas, undertaking a surveillance of the home of former President Bush, and apparently undertaken other planning, had already accomplished certain, moved ahead with several of the planning stages, including the location of safe houses, and setting up the infrastructure for the operation. So that is what we have, and that's what's being uncovered. So that's what we have this week, Christian, an increasingly dysfunctional law enforcement performance in the most sensitive area of the United States, and an increasingly functional terrorist network operating inside the United States.
Terrible.
It's not a nice combination. It's not a nice combination at all. But this seems to be what we have to conclude globally from what we're finding out over the past week. So, having said that, let's move on to what we often discuss on this show, the latest update on Ukraine. And I would take off from what I said in last week. Russia, at least for the moment, is winning the economic war. On the economic front, Russia is winning. I don't see how it's a horrible thing to say, but I don't understand. I don't see any other way of putting it. Okay, the ruble is stabilizing further. It is now higher against the dollar and other foreign currencies than it even was a week ago, when it already was being quoted at 5 years highs. In fact, the central bank of Russia, the ruble has stabilized to such a point as a result of the fact that buyers of Russian oil that continue to buy Russian oil despite U.S. sanctions at a high volume, have to buy, or increasingly buying rubles to conduct the purchases which Russia now requires to buy oil in order to stabilize the ruble. And it's working very, very well, including the Europeans. In fact, the Europeans above all, they're the ones that buy more Russian oil than anybody else. And they're doing it through the system that Russia insisted on, which is they have to buy rubles to buy Russian oil. Despite all their rhetoric about cutting off dependency on Russian oil and all the talk about embargoing Russian oil and so on, they continue to talk. The EU continues to say that they got to get a Russian oil. Maybe they might be able to do this, but through alternative sources in 1 or 2 years' time. But for the moment, they continue to buy Russian oil. And this is working so well that the Russian central bank has actually decreased the interest rate on the ruble. So this which makes it much easier for the rest of the economy, for investment, for imports, for the people in Russia. So it is now 9%, and we could go to the 20%. So this is very good. This also helps to stabilize the Russian economy. It allows for investment that previously would have been completely impossible. So that's what we have today. I mean, the sanctions against Russia are not working. At least not in the oil, and at least not so far as their oil trade, which is the main thing that keeps Russia going. I mean, that's their main export. And it's undoubtedly is leading to problems with imports. Russia can't take certain technology. It may even be affecting their ability to produce weapons, because they can't get certain software and certain technology from Western countries that they used to get before. But as far as their ability to finance the government, finance their army, and keep their economy going, the sanctions are not working. Russian oil is being bought as much, if not more, and at higher prices. Maybe not more, but at higher prices, certainly, than before. It's allowing the Chinese to buy a lot of Russian oil, because now they're buying much more Russian oil, since it's a lot cheaper now as a result of the. Excuse me, Christian. Actually, it's a lot higher. So the prices they're actually charging for the oil as a result of the sanctions are higher. So they're making more money. They're making more money on selling less oil. What a deal! What a deal! That's what the sanctions have produced. And not only oil, but apparently the Russians are also now they now seek, through their control of through the control of Mariupol, Kherson, and a string of other ports in southern Ukraine, they now control the flow of a great deal, in fact, control the storage site of a great deal of wheat being smuggled from Ukraine, that was being exported from Ukraine. Excuse me, Christian, I'm getting my words a little bit confused here. They now control about 25 million tons of grain that was stored in these ports and was to be exported mainly to markets, possibly in Africa and the Middle East, where there could be widespread famine if they are cut off from Ukrainian wheat exports over any great period of time. So they control 25 million tons. Russia now controls 25 million tons of stored wheat, okay? Stored grain, which is probably enough to affect the flow, the price, the supply of grain to the entire world. And it's one of the things that UN Secretary General Guterres, as well as other world leaders, have been asking Putin if he could please allow this grain to be shipped to the original destinations. According to the Russians, there are 70 ships, 70 vessels, mainly grain exporting vessels, I'd imagine, in these ports, waiting to move the grain out of Ukraine to other parts of the world. There are, yes, 70 vessels from 16 different countries blocked inside 6 Black Sea ports, including Odessa, which, although it's not captured by the Russians, it's still It's blockaded by the Russians. Kherson and Mariupol and other ports in the area. So they're blocking the export of 25 million tons at these ports and another 25 million tons that have been harvested and have yet to be delivered. So you're talking about 50 million tons of grain that the Russians are now control, whose flow, whose supply to the world, the Russians now control. And of course, the Russians are saying, okay, fine, we'll arrange for safe corridors for this grain if you start lifting the sanctions. So far, the West has not agreed to this, and this will be a very hard pill to swallow. But perhaps this may be subject at some point to a negotiation. Who knows? So the sanction policy against Russia is backfiring. And the UK foreign minister said that accused Russia of holding the world to ransom with the grain, because if this grain does not make it out, especially to the impoverished third world countries, it could threaten massive famines in the Middle East and Africa, creating more instability and a massive, huge flow of illegal migration towards Europe. So this is the result of all this.
More insecurity, more international security.
More security. Now, on the ground, again, the news are not good in the military field. It appears that Russia is gaining ground in the Donbass region. It has apparently used thermobaric weapons. Okay, it's used some already to obliterate some Ukrainian outward defenses. They haven't used it against the city itself, but they have used it against outlying Ukrainian defenses around Severodonetsk, which is a key city that they have to capture in order to be able to control the Donbass region. There are two more after that, but this is the first step. This is the first target they have to get. And they manage as a result to encircle Severodonetsk. It's encircled, it's surrounded, and they will obviously submit it to a long siege like they did Mariupol. And we know what the result of that was. Unless the Ukrainians can break through the Russian encirclement, I guess we can eventually see a surrender of Severodonetsk. So that's the news this week. The only way that the Ukrainians may be able to counter this is is if the U.S., NATO supplies them with a weapon system known as the Mobility Artillery Rocket System, MIMARS, which can fire an equal amount of rounds over long distances. In other words, they don't have to bring them right up to the front. They can fire them from a long distance away to maybe break up Russian positions around Severodonetsk. There is resistance to doing this because this would give the Ukrainians the capability of hitting Russian territory. And Russian Minister Lavrov has warned this would be an unacceptable escalation of the military aid, of the military assistance being given to Ukraine. So I think NATO is thinking twice about this. We don't know. It's under consideration, but we don't know if they're going to actually go ahead and do this and supply them with the only kind of weapon system that can possibly relieve their situation in this part of in Severodonetsk and the other cities, which are going to be besieged in the Donbass region, and whose fall would give Russia total control of the Donbass region. And this, of course, is being done as Zelensky insisted he's not going to give an inch. He's not going to concede an inch of territory to Russia in any negotiations. He's not going to concede the Donbass. He's not going to concede the Crimea. He's not going to concede any part of the South, obviously. So a negotiated solution between Russia and Ukraine appears to be very difficult to achieve at this point. Discussions are now between the Russians, Putin, and some of the European presidents, Scholz in Germany and Macron in France. Biden is, he's AWOL. I don't think he's talking to Putin at all. Okay, U.S. President Biden. And I think this is what Putin actually wants. I think he wants to wedge NATO away from the United States, maybe pressure the Europeans, if not the Americans, the EU, to put pressure on Zelensky to agree to his terms, and create a whole, an official level of negotiation, or to create a negotiation, go over Zelensky's head, maybe go over or bypass the U.S. and possibly negotiating a peace deal with the Europeans, which they would then impose on Zelensky. I think this is possibly Putin's strategy right now. And he seems to be on the way to achieving this. He seems to be getting there. I mean, there's also Turkey, which is vetoing the entry of Finland and Sweden into NATO, and is interested in maybe helping to broker a peace deal in Ukraine. In spite of the fact that Turkey has been supplying weapons to Zelensky, I may add, it's just given them some very effective drones. But this appears to be the status of the situation in the Ukraine at the moment. NATO has been reinforcing its defenses in the Baltic states and Poland with the introduction of a new radar system, a very powerful radar system into Poland, which can detect hypersonic missiles at ranges of, what can detect a missile at a range of 18,000 miles, okay? Which is mainly, that would enable to detect the launching of a hypersonic missile. So that's presumably what has been employed to do. Some sort of protection against a possible attack by hypersonic missiles, which Russia keeps brandishing all the time. They've got these great hypersonic missiles that can strike any target in the West undetected in a matter of minutes. So they've got a system, the radar system there in place. They're taking it seriously enough to install a radar system in Poland, which can supposedly detect the launching of a hypersonic missile that's launching at the launching stage. And they've also deployed NASAM systems, NASAMS systems in the Baltic states, which are shorter range systems, batteries supposedly to similar to the Patriot system. They've increased the number of these mainly land-to-air anti-aircraft batteries in the area, in the Baltics, to protect against, again, this would be against any possible conventional Russian cruise missile or drone or airstrike. The Russians complain that this is an escalation because the missiles in the Patriot and the AMRAAM and THAAD missiles in these batteries, each of which contains 6 of these AMRAAM missiles, these missiles can easily be replaced, which are defensive missiles, can easily be replaced with offensive missiles. This has been an argument the Russians have had all the time, that any defensive missile system based in the NATO East European countries are a threat to Russia, because the defensive missiles can be replaced with offensive missiles, which is an academic argument, I think, at best. But anyway, this is what the Russians are saying. But this is the situation on the ground in Ukraine and in Eastern Europe, and it doesn't bode well for the West. It does not bode well for the West.
Why does Turkey's President Erdogan not want Finland and Sweden to join NATO?
Well, the reason he gives publicly is that he blames Finland and NATO for harboring, giving asylum to Kurdish rebels, which have been fighting a guerrilla insurgency against Turkey in the southeastern Kurdish region of Turkey for years, if not decades. And Sweden and Finland allows asylum for some of their leaders. They can live there. It allows them propaganda facilities. I don't think it allows them any military. They give them any military support, but it allows them a certain level of diplomatic and political presence, as well as protection to their members and their leaders in those countries. This has upset Turkey for a very long time, and Turkey is insisting that Sweden and Finland have to lift this protection for the KKK. That's the name of the Kurdish nationalist movement, which Turkey considers to be a terrorist organization. For Turkey to consider them allies, but of course, I think other NATO countries also allow asylum for Kurdish leaders, like including Germany. So I don't think that this in itself is a reason. I think this is an excuse. I think a larger reason may well be that Turkey may use Finland's and Sweden's membership of NATO as a form to also secretly leverage NATO into pressuring Ukraine to arrive at a negotiated solution with Russia, something that Erdogan has favored since the beginning of the war. In spite of the fact, as I say, that he has given some valuable military assistance to Ukraine. But I think that Erdogan would very much like to be able to broker a deal between Ukraine and Russia, turning him into a diplomatic superstar in the region. So I think that could also be a hidden agenda that Erdogan has in blocking membership of Sweden and Finland in NATO. And he gains brownie points with Putin. I mean, obviously, it makes him look. He's a guy that Putin has to look at if he's going to try to get anything out of NATO. So that's a factor.
It can be said to conclude that the borders are threatened by terrorism in the United States and NATO country?
I don't understand your question, Christian. I mean, the borders are threatened by terrorists.
It can be said to conclude that the borders are threatened by the terrorism in the United States and in NATO country?
Yes, borders are threatened in the United States by terrorists, and in NATO countries by Russia.
By Russia. That's it. That's the conclusion. That is true. That is very true. That is true. Russia is a terrorist country. It's attacked.
Oh yeah, no question about it. No question about it.
And now in Mexico is the next problem for the border. No, is more security. We need more security in Mexico. And other regions of the United Europe.
Well, there's a limit to how much security you're going to get in Mexico, Christian, because the cartels control the border region, right?
Yeah, right.
I mean, former President Trump had the situation somewhat under control with Mexico, had an unwritten agreement with Mexico, which they would increase policing of the border, virtually threatening military action if they didn't do it. I mean, some say that he threatened special forces raids into Mexico to capture cartel leaders that may include certain officials in the Mexican government. It's been said that he had at some point also threatened missile strikes against targets in Mexico that served or the cartels, either the homes of cartel leaders or the or storage depots for drugs. And but yes, I mean, I think he had threatened some kind of military action against Mexico if they didn't put more of an effort to deploy the military to police the borders. And in fact, the Mexicans were doing that. Under this administration, with its open border policy, this has stopped. Okay, the pressure's off.
Yes.
So naturally, the Mexicans aren't doing a damn thing. And as long as the cartels have control over that border, and the governments have a policy of allowing them to control that border, it's getting difficult to see how security there can be increased in any way.
That's very true.
In any significant way, especially with what we seem to have dysfunctional police departments operating in the border region. Yeah. It's come out of the massacre in this small Texas town.
That's true. Chapo Sanz is govern the cartels in Mexico and the government. That's true.
Sorry, you said who governed the? Sorry,
I said the Chapo Guzman's son.
Oh, Chapo Guzman.
Son is working with the cartels in Mexico and have a control. The three sons of the Chapo control all country in the Mexico.
Yeah, I mean, his son is, and that's one of many cartels. And of course, you've got China there in a very big way. They're smuggling in massive quantities of fentanyl.
Fentanyl, yeah, the new drugs, Chinese new drugs, fentanyl.
Synthetic drugs being smuggled in from China. That's the main. I think that's the main type of narcotic coming in from Mexico these days. Synthetic Chinese manufactured synthetic drugs. That's what's coming in.
It's more dangerous. It's synthetic is more dangerous. Yeah, it's called drugs.
And interestingly enough, some of these, a lot of the money from this is being laundered in Canada.
In Canada. Oh, shit. Oh my God. It's a lot of money in Canada. The synthetic.
Some of the money of the Chinese drug smuggling operations is being laundered in Canada.
In Canada. Oh my God.
That's according to some investigative reports that have come out, that have been published or been
dangerous.
In Canada.
The international criminal organization is terrible. Wow. For conclusion,
and of course, it's the perfect way of laundering money for any terrorist operation. You involved in a major drug transaction across the border, and you launder the money through a terrorist group, and you launder the money into a terrorist operation.
Our money is recycled and
recycled.
Yeah, recycled.
You recycle drug money into terrorist operations.
That's the reason. It's terrible. Thank you.
Doesn't look good.
Hmm? What we talk on?
So that's the situation, Christian. It's it doesn't look good. On the upside, I would say there is a there is something that I've been informed about by American business, a major American business corporation, which is that there is an American company, Franklin Mining, that is increasingly active in the mining of not just lithium, but other rare earth minerals in the South America's lithium, what's known as the lithium triangle between Argentina, Chile, and Bolivia. He's involved in Argentina, where he's got a major concession for a lithium in the lithium reserve. He's doing it in Chile, and he's also looking into doing it in Bolivia, where it's a bit more difficult perhaps due to political reasons. And he's involved in developing, there are minerals being mined there to develop nanotechnology, which is a new technology, which was previously exclusively used for military purposes. Missile for, high precision guided missiles and other types of very sensitive military, which are being allowed to go into civil use. And this technology is developed with rare earth minerals that are, until now, almost exclusively found or are found in very few areas other than the lithium triangle in South America. But apparently the governments there are moving ahead with opening up the exploration for these minerals and development of these mines for at least one American company, Franklin Mining, which is out of Texas. And at least there's an American handle, or the Western handle, on the development of one of the most, possibly the most important minerals that we have today for the kind of technologies that are being developed today. Robotics, vaccine technologies, and this kind of thing.
Interesting technology, all the Franklin mining. Very interesting talk about the business too in Latin America is very interesting too. And thank you all for conclusion. Dear Martin, that's the finish of this podcast and see you next week. Was for your conclusion or that's it all?
Thank you, Christian. See you next week.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Subscribe and share it. Think about international security and business.